Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where your job wasn't just exhausting, it could end you before midday. That's right, we're diving into the gritty, backbreaking truth of how castles were truly built in the Middle Ages. You probably picture soaring walls, grand halls, and a creaking drawbridge over a moat. Sure, that's the finished masterpiece. But to get there, someone remarkably like you had to bleed for every single stone. And let's be honest, you likely won't make it through this. So, before we begin, if you're enjoying this kind of deep dive into history's grimmest realities, consider hitting like and subscribing, but only if you genuinely appreciate what I do here. I'll keep unearthing these forgotten stories, and the algorithm does love a little appreciation. Also, drop a comment. What city are you watching from, and what time is it there? I'm curious who else is awake right now, pondering whether medieval footwear was truly as miserable as it appears. Spoiler, it was. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a gray sky and a biting wind that stings your ears. Mud squelches in your boots, and something worse clings beneath your fingernails. You squint upward at a half-built stone tower, its jagged outline cutting into the dawn. Your breath escapes in pale clouds. You're in England, let's say, the mid-13th century, the year 1247, and you're a laborer on a royal castle project. Not a skilled mason, just a warm, aching body with a strong back, hired to lift, carry, drag, and occasionally bleed. You didn't choose this. Your landlord, your lord, or plain old hunger chose it for you. The castle's going up a couple of miles from your village. You heard whispers all winter. Now it's spring, and you've been handed a rope and pointed toward a quarry. You're not alone. Dozens, maybe hundreds of men surround you. Some are younger, most are older, a few carry tools. Most are just figuring it out as they go. Welcome to your new life, stone and sweat, mostly in that order. There's no training, no safety gear, no instruction manual, just shouting rough sketches, and the faint hope that if you don't mess up too badly, you'll still have both legs by week's end. The first thing that hits you aside from the cold is the sheer scale of the operation. This isn't one building, it's a dozen jobs unfolding at once. Some clear land, others dig the moat. Carts arrive from the forest, stacked with logs, straw, or raw stone. And there's the tower itself, barely 10 feet high but already crawling. With scaffolding and voices, no one explains the plan. The plan isn't meant for you. It lives inside the head of the master mason, a man in fine wool, clutching a wax tablet, his face locked in a permanent scowl. He might nod your way, or he might not see you at all. You join a crew unloading stone. Each block is the size of a sheep and twice as heavy. You're given a thick rope and told, never let go. Simple enough, and so, block by block, your days begin. You quickly learn medieval construction isn't just hard, it's improvised. Every castle is different. No blueprints, just a rough idea of what the Lord wants, and endless guesswork. Stones aren't pre-cut. Mortar isn't pre-mixed. The terrain is always uneven, and you just deal with it. Maybe you build around a boulder. Maybe you dig for 6 days, searching for solid ground. Then give up and pray no one notices. Even the concept of a castle is fuzzy in this era. Some lords want a fortified manor. Others demand elaborate keeps with curtain walls and twin towers. Castles are as much about ego as defense status symbols visible for miles, screaming, "I'm rich, I'm powerful, and I'll boil you in oil if you try anything." Great for the Lord, for you, endless work, endless lifting, hammering, stacking, adjusting, redoing. And while he sleeps in a stone chamber with a view, you're in a shared hut or a canvas tenton straw. You wake stiff. You eat what you can, dry bread, root vegetables, weak ale. Yet, strangely, there's rhythm in the grind. You learn your team's pace. You know who pulls their weight and who fakes a limp after lunch. You trade crude jokes. You sing off-key work songs. And when the sun hits the scaffolding just right and a new row of stone locks into place, there's a flicker of something almost like pride, of course. Then the foreman yells, "It's crooked," and you do it all over again. Historically, most castles weren't built by slaves or armies. They were raised by conscripted peasants, day laborers, seasonal workers, and a handful of skilled artisans. That mix meant progress was slow and uneven. Early Norman keeps often began as wooden structures, upgraded to stone over years or decades. Famous castles like Dover or Caerphilly were massive, costly, and took generations to complete. And here's a twist. While we think of castles as purely medieval, the Romans built their own versions centuries earlier. Forts like Hadrian Wall or the Saxon shore forts served similar purposes. So you're part of a long tradition of miserable labor in the name of security, yea, legacy. Historians still debate how planned medieval construction really was. Some argue master masons held detailed mental blueprints, their knowledge passed through guilds. Others say it was trial and error plans, shifting with the weather, the budget, or what the Lord's wife saw on her latest pilgrimage. Either way, one thing's clear: you, the laborer, were the hands, not the brain. Now you're covered in mud, sore head to toe, eyes stinging from lime dust, trying not to drop a stone on your foot. The castle looms unfinished, eternal. You've got 20 more years of this, maybe more. But hey, at least you're not the guy in the quarry yet. You wake to a boot kicking your shelter. That's your alarm. No bells, no harp music, just rough wood thumping near your head. The sun's barely a gray smear on the horizon, but it's time to start again. Your hands ache before you sit up. Your back still burns from 3 days ago. Your knees feel like they've been replaced with gravel. You stretch and instantly regret it. You pull on your stiff, sweat-stiffened tunic and crusted leather boots that smell like decay. Welcome to another day in paradise. No breakfast waits. If you're lucky, you stashed a mold-resistant hunk of bread. You chew as you walk, no time to sit. The path to the worksite is already filling with bodies. Some cough, some limp. No one speaks. The world is cold. The sky can't decide if it'll rain. This is your life now, sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sundays, your break, church and chores. No weekends, no holidays, unless someone important dies. And pray you're not volunteered to carry stones during a royal wedding. That's not an honor, it's extra labor under extra scrutiny. You retrieve your tools from the communal shedef. You were smart. You hid them yesterday so no one borrowed your best chisel. Tools are personal, prized, and often stolen. Your hammer's handle is wrapped in cloth to spare your palms. It helps, sort of. You tuck your gloves under your belt, more holes than leather, but they feel like armor. The sun finally shows. Itself not warm, just brighter. Mist hangs over the half-built wall. The scaffold boards are slick with dew. You hope they dry before you climb with a bucket of mortar. Wet wood plus heavy load equals gravity's favorite game. The foreman bellows more grunt than word, but everyone knows. Let's go. People move into position. Some head to the quarry, some to the mortar pits. You're assigned to the gatehouse this week. They rotate crews to spread the pain and keep you from complaining. Your arms are numb by the time you reach your spot. Your fingers tingle from cold. You haul a crate of stone chips up the scaffold, boots thudding on hollow boards. Every step's a gamble. Some planks are new. Others groan, like they'll snap on a sneeze. But you climb anyways, low, careful as always. At the top, the view is bleak. You see the future castle taking shape, a wide courtyard, curtain walls snaking outward, towers as stubs or pits. Workers swarm like ants on carrion. You dump the stone, grab your trowel. Mortar fresh, steaming, caustic awaits. You spread it like frosting minus the taste. Lift a small stone, angle it, and drop it with a heavy thunk. Tap, tap, tap. Scrape, scrape, repeat. Hours blur. Your mind drifts while your hands work. You think of your neighbor's chickens, your sister's wedding, the lump in your boot that might be a pebble or your toe rotting off. Anything to avoid counting stones, hours, regrets. The sun warms your shoulders nice until dust bakes into your skin. Sweat dries in salty patches along your jaw. Flies arrive. They don't care how tired you are. They want your eyes, your mouth, crumbs in your teeth. You swat them without thinking. Below, the quarry crew returns. Teams roll massive blocks off carts onto sledges, no wheels, just dragging. The stones will be winched up inch by inch. One cracks on impact. Everyone groans. A day's work wasted. Someone will be blamed. Maybe docked pef they were even paid. Here's what fairy tales omit. Most castle builders weren't skilled craftsmen with coin purses. Master masons, carpenters, blacksmiths, CS, they earned well. But haulers, stackers, diggers, shovelers, they worked for bread, beer, and the vague promise of protection. Some paid debts or taxes with labor. Others were just hungry, get injured. Too bad, no compensation. No healing herbs unless you stole them. You might get lighter duty carrying water or you'd be replaced. Your body was just another cost. Quirky fact. Some records show laborers had to bring their own tools, food, and water because the Lord wouldn't pay for extras. Imagine a 12-hour shift, then walking home to sharpen your chisel in a stream, and yet castles rose. Why? Scholars debate it. Feudal power displays, real defense needs, political symbols for hosting, taxing, showing off tapestries. For you, it doesn't matter. You don't attend strategy meetings. You just stack stones under an indecisive sky. As the sun sinks, someone yells the Indove Day call. Hammering slows. You stand, bones groaning. The sight's still incomplete, maybe forever. But today, you built a wall. That wall will become something massive, permanent something. Future eyes might call beautiful, never knowing the cost. You sling your hammer and walk back to your tent. Morning returns without fanfare, just aching joints and the truth that sleep is never enough. You drag yourself from under rough wool. Outside, the camp stirs like a kicked beehive, murmurs, coughs, clinking tools. You rub grit from your eyes and head toward a dying fire, hoping to warm your hands. Only embers and damp smoke greet you. Then the foreman tosses you a ragged hood and points to the master mason's tent. You're learning the big picture, he says. Punishment or reward. You follow, curiosity faintly stirring. The tenta canvas lean-to-holds, strange tools, strings, lead plumb lines, arm-length wooden compasses, chalk-stained parchment. At its center stands the master mason broomstick, thin, stiff, muttering over a diagram that looks like a spider's drunken web. Gatehouse elevation, he grumbles, noticing you without looking up. You're here to learn what a castle is, he says. You nod. He sighs like life has betrayed him. Fine. It's not just a big house with a pointy roof. And so begins your crash course in 13th century castle architecture. A castle, he explains, is part fortress, part symbol, part tax office, with better ceilings. It keeps people out, stores what matters: grain, weapons, royal cousins, and projects power. Walls are thick to intimidate. Towers double as lookouts and boasts. The great hall houses a hearth big enough to roast pigs. There are chapels, kitchens, guardrooms, and, if you're lucky, a guardrobe, a hole where gravity handles waste. But here's the kicker. No single blueprint exists. Every castle is a custom nightmare. Some cling to hilltops, others squat in valleys. Moats hold water, stakes, or just regret. Many start as wooden Matandabailey forts, upgraded to stone if the Lord has money, patience, and doesn't die mid-build. He teaches you terms: barbican, bailey, curtain wall, machikal, anatomy, outer bailey, stables, troops, livestock, inner bailey, closer to the keep. That's where the Lord drinks too much and makes bad decisions. He says it like gospel. You notice the drawing looks symmetrical, but the real site is chaotic sloped ground, uneven rock, a stream flooding the west trench. Why doesn't the design match the land, you ask? He chuckles. It does in my head. Drawings help, but we adjust as we go. Nature doesn't care about your sketches. He shows a wooden model, laundry basket sized, with perfect towers and crenellations. How long to finish, you ask? He snorts. 20. Depends on money, war, weather. Whether his lordship gets bored and joins a crusade, so it might never be done. He shrugs. Many aren't. You build what you can. Someone else finishes it. Castles are generational. Back at the worksite, the truth settles. You're not finishing a castle. You're starting one or continuing someone else's start. If it's ever completed, it'll be long after your bones are part of the foundation. You mention this to an older, worker, wiry man with 3 teeth and a smirk. Thought we were almost done. He spits. Son, we haven't even built the part they'll fight over. Right now, this is just the outline. Still, the knowledge sticks. As you haul mortar and guide stones, you start seeing how pieces might connect. This curve to that tower, that trough to a future well, the muddy square to a great hall. Between maybe and actually, though, lies a mountain of labor. Stone doesn't cut itself. Wood doesn't haul itself. And morale doesn't soar when the Lord rides past in furs, says nothing, and complains the tower isn't round enough. Oddly, some castles have staircases to nowhere or doors into walls. Were these errors from shifting plans, intentional traps to confuse invaders, or, as conspiracy lovers whisper, cursed stones that bring ruin to any mason who moves them? That last one feels oddly comforting. Maybe that's why your hands keep blistering. By day's end, your muscles are jelly. You sit by the fire, chewing a hard carrot traded for linen. Around you, plague rumors, foreman gossip, weather guesses. You glance at the real castle lopsided scaffold covered, the model's clean lines. It'll never be perfect, but somehow, you're still building it. You wake to the foreman yelling something's 3 degrees off. Either the scaffold slipped or someone stacked stones backward. Yes, that's a real issue. Today, your name's on the tower foundation roster, which means 12 hours shoveling gravel and muck, trying not to drown in a trench. Your boots soak in minutes. You've stopped hoping to stay dry. Everything leaks: sky, barrels, boots, soul. The master mason stalks past, muttering calculations like he's counting ghosts. He holds a carved measuring rod. When he orders your trench shifted 6 inches left, no one argues, not twice. Anyway, there's shouting today. Someone laid the foundation's first corner a foot off-grid. Uncorrected, the tower would lean not like a tourist attraction, but like a death trap. So you spend the morning redigging yesterday's hole, and then it clicks. Castle building isn't just brute strength, it's patience, calculation, and endless arguing over details that look identical to you but matter deeply to men in feathered hats. Precision is a luxury here. Terrain fights back, tools warp in rain, stones vary wildly. Good enough becomes its own kind of perfection. The foreman's face hovers between constipation and existential dread. He accuses stone haulers of lazy stacking, mortar mixers of watering it down, and you of digging like a drunk squirrel. You try not to take it personally. He probably said the same at his wedding. You eat cold porridge from an onion bowl beside a half-finished wall. A young worker, barely bearded, sits beside you, eyes wide. This tower'll be taller than the trees, he says, mouth full. They'll see it from the next county. You nod. We'll live to see it. Foundations alone take months, especially on uncooperative ground. When you ask how deep it should go, someone shrugs. Deep enough not to sink. And then there's groundwater. Every rain floods the trenches. You've bailed more than you've dug. That helpful stream, now your enemy. It seeps everywhere, undermines walls, swallows boots like quicksand. To fight it, masons layer crushed stone and sand. For drainage, gore drive wooden pilings deep into the earth. Sometimes it works. Sometimes walls still crack, and everyone pretends not to notice. Medieval engineering is a series of gambles. Some tricks are clever. One builder used sheep's wool for insulation. Others are bizarre. Another filled a foundation gap with dead pigs. Really? Scholars debate how much was science versus instinct. Some say master masons understood geometry and stress. Others say it was experience and lucky guesses. Truth is likely both. The best read the land, sensed danger, and adjusted. The rest buried in their mistakes. You spend the afternoon shoveling stone dust into drainage trenches. Monotonous, gritty, hands raw, back aching like you've been joust As the sun dips, shadows stretch over the half-formed walls. You can almost see the tower's shape, now a footprint, a promise, then silence. The master mason calls for quiet. Everyone hushes. He paces the foundation, taps corners, checks guide ropes. Then he nods. We start laying stone tomorrow. The air shifts, excitement laced with dread. Once stone is laid, everything must be right. A flawed foundation means a leaning, cracking, collapsing tower years later. And no lord wants to die under falling masonry. That night, camp stories swirl. A French castle tower collapsing during a wedding. A noble who ignored warnings and built on marshland. It sank like a drunk in a tub. You fall asleep, thinking how even stone isn't permanent. How a grand tower can fall because someone laid the first block wrong. And tomorrow, you'll be the one laying it. No pressure. There's a strange hush over the site the morning the first stones go down. Not true silence grunts, footsteps. A mule's whinny, but a focused stillness. Everyone's watching. The foundation is declared ready. Near miracle. Rope lines are taut. The trench is leveled. Someone's even swept gravel away with pine branches, as if neatness might appease the stone gods. Now it's your turn in the sacred ritual of moving rocks heavier than your uncle's ox cart. The first block waits on a wooden sledge, gray, hulking, smug, quarried weeks ago, trimmed by masons to near right angles. Your job, slide it into place without crushing anyone or chipping a corner. Both happen often. You and 5 others grip poles through. Iron rings on the sledge. You lift. The weight isn't dramatic. It's simply absolutely there. It sinks into you. Your arms and pulls at your spine with the smug certainty of a stone that knows it can break you if you flinch. You stagger one step, then another. The trench awaits. It takes a long, grueling while to move that single block. Into position, minutes filled with cursing, sweating, and stubbed toes. The mason's apprentice watches you like a hawk, chalk line in hand, ready to bark the moment something shifts, even a finger's width off alignment. When the block finally slides into the prepared socket, there's a pause, then a tap, tap, tap from the mason's hammer, checking the fit. Another pause, then the nod. You've just placed the first stone of the south tower. One down. About 2,000 to go. Each block that follows must interlock like teeth. The foundation stones are enormous, heavier than most you've handled, because they must bear the entire weight of the structure. No shortcuts here. Mortar is spread, lines checked, and then comes the heave-ho rhythm of laborers dragging stones from the pile to the trench. You fall into a grim dance. Lift, carry, lower, adjust over and over. And here's something odd. Castles weren't always built with uniform stone. The lower levels used massive, cleanly cut rectangular blocks called ashlar for maximum strength. But higher up, where weight mattered less, builders often switched to rubble packed between 2 neat outer layers, a trick to save time and materials while keeping the facade solid looking. So your job today might involve hauling beautifully squared blocks or armfuls of broken shards to be stuffed into the middle like stony stuffing. You wonder if future visitors will ever know the difference. As the day wears on, your arms turn to jelly. You manage not to drop anything, though a fellow worker does. His grip slips. The corner of the block smashes into the trench edge, and everyone flinches. Miraculously, no one's hurt, but but the corners chipped. The mason looked like someone just insulted his ancestors. The block is hauled off to be the worker gets a sharp tongue lashing and an extra shift on latrine duty. It could have been worse. And let's talk about that for a second. Punishment. This site doesn't run on kindness. There are rules. Break tools, delay work, or damage. Material and you pay for it. Sometimes in coin, sometimes in extra labor, and sometimes in ways that make you wish for extra labor instead. No one here is irreplaceable, especially not the unskilled and accidents. You might think they'd make exceptions. They don't. There's an old man named Garrus, maybe 60. If he's a Dehu, walks with a limp that never healed. Word around camp is he dropped a block on his own foot 5 years ago at another site. The Lord paid a local barber to stitch him up, then dismissed him with half wages. He limped for a year before finding work again. Now he keeps his head down and carries only the lighter loads. You think he might be one of the lucky ones, because the truth is, stone doesn't care about you. It doesn't know your name. It doesn't remember your pain. You haul it, shape it, place it tanned, then it sits there for centuries, while your bones rot beneath the same dirt you dug out. Work continues into the late afternoon. Shadows stretch. The light turns golden, less gray than before. The foreman calls for one last haul before day's end. This time, you're assigned to a pulley rig, simple in theory, rope and wheel system on a wooden frame to lift blocks into place on the upper foundation layers. In practice, it's terrifying. The frame creaks under strain. The rope groans. The block swings with a mind of its own. You and 2 others must guide it using nothing but shouted directions and long wooden poles. One wrong move and the block could slam into the wall or worse, fall. Everyone holds their breath as it hovers, trembling in the air like it's considering betrayal. You ease it into place. The mason taps, nods. It's done by the time you stagger back to camp. The sun's nearly gone. You sit near the fire, hands too sore to eat properly, eyes burning from dust. Around you, the crew is quieter than usual. Today felt different. You didn't just move stones. You started something taller than yourself. Something that might still stand long after anyone remembers your name. Someone offers a wineskin. You take a swig. It tastes like vinegar and wood, but it numbs the ache in your teeth for a minute. You glance toward the tower's base, now ringed in fresh stone. It's barely 2 feet high, but you can already see its shape in your mind. A quirky fact comes back to you. Some medieval workers carved tiny symbols into stone's initials or icons, not out of vanity, but to track how many they'd laid, especially when paid by the piece. You didn't get to mark yours today. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the next one. For now, you sit and watch the smoke drift upward, vanishing into the dark. 1 stone down, 1,000 more to go. Morning arrives, heavy with the smell of smoke and something between wet hay and burning hair. You blink awake. In the dimness of your tent, throat dry, head pounding faintly from last night's vinegar wine. Outside the camp buzzes either earlier than usual or you overslept. Judging by the thin sun slicing through canvas and the rising chorus of swearing near the tool racks, it's the former. Your boots still damped despite the fire squish as you shove your feet in. Another day, another shift moving things that refuse to be moved. But today, you're headed somewhere new. The quarry, not by choice, of course. Someone's been reassigned to stonework and that someone is you. The walk takes half an hour. It's not scenic. You pass fields, then a marsh that reeks like a rotting cow until you reach the pit itself. It looks like a giant took a bite out of the earth and lost interest halfway. Piles of rough stone littered the edges like oversized teeth. Dust curls upward from the activity below. The sound hits first, iron clanging on rock, the dull thud of sledges striking, the occasional yelp. When someone drops something on a toe, it's less a work site, more a battlefield between man and geology. You're greeted by a grizzled man with tree trunk arms and a beard that defies grooming. He waves vaguely toward blunt chisels and picks and tells you to start trimming. That's all the instruction you get, so you kneel beside a jagged block and begin learning what it means to fight a mountain. Quarrying is the kind of work that makes everything else seem polite. You don't just pull stone from the ground, you coax it, convince it, threaten it with blunt force. First, you find the natural veins in the rock, the lines where it's most likely to split. If lucky, it behaves. If not, it shatters wrong and becomes rubble. Either way, you carry it. You wedge a chisel into a fault line and strike with a hammer. The shock reverberates up your arm like a warning again and again. Eventually, with a reluctant crack, a chunk breaks free. You've harvested your first building block and your first blister. Quarried stones vary by purpose. Some are massive for foundations or corners, others smaller for arches, lintels, or facing. But before any stone leaves the quarry, it must be shaped. Rough trimming happens right here, with tools unchanged for centuries. A hammer, a point chisel, and sheer stubbornness. You learn to read the rock. Limestone is soft, easy to shape, popular, though it erodes faster in rain. Granite might as well be divine punishment. Most here is sandstone, somewhat cooperative, reasonably durable, just crumbly enough to keep you paranoid it's falling apart. By midday, you've learned quarry dust is the true enemy. It gets in your eyes, mouth, under nails, even ears, despite your hood. It cakes your skin, turns sweat to gritty mud. You cough constantly, throat raw. Older workers have a deep, rattling hack they wear like a badge. They call it stone lung, and no one seems eager to avoid it. Then there's the heat. Unlike the build site, where scaffolding catches a breeze, the quarry is a sun trap. Stone reflects heat like an oven. Your tunic sticks to your skin, your hair mats under your cap. One man passes out before noon, is dragged to shade, revived with water and slaps, then put back to work in a haze of fatigue. You wonder how many castles could have been built if people didn't insist on stone. Why not wood or clay, anything that doesn't require destroying a cliff? The answer, of course, is permanence. Castles must endure sieges, storms, centuries. For that, you need stone. Quirky fact, some medieval sites quarried inside the castle. Walls not because it was smarter, but because the best stone source was right there. In other cases, old Roman ruins were dismantled and recycled into new walls. Who needs heritage when there's a tower to finish? Back in your reality, you've been promoted, not for skill, but because someone else failed worse. You now help haul stones onto carts. It involves teamwork, curses, and a cart driver who appears to hate everyone equally. You wedge a wooden roller under a massive block, then use crowbars to tilt it onto a sledge. Oxen pulled the cart slowly, frustratingly, but at least they don't argue. Here's what no one warns you. Loading is only half the job. You ride back with it perched on a wobbly plank, 100-pound block behind you, on a road more pothole than path. Every bump threatens to launch you into a bush. Every jolt reminds you how much you miss stationary suffering at the castle site. The stone is offloaded, logged by an apprentice, and sorted by use, foundation, wall face, coping, detail. You're sent back to the quarry almost immediately. Rinse, repeat. As the sun dips, you're covered in dust, scratched head to toe, too tired to remember your name. But you did it. You pulled stone from the earth. You shaped it. You helped it move toward becoming something bigger than yourself. You also may have chipped a fingernail clean off, but that's tomorrow's problem. Back at camp, someone shares a tale of a cursed quarry in Wales. Every stone removed had to be returned by nightfall, or strange voices would whisper, "You think." That sounds like a great excuse to skip hauling shifts. Another man mentions the legendary whistling stone of Normandy, carved just right. It supposedly sings in the wind. No one's found one, but maybe the next block you chisel will hum. Probably not. But the thought makes the dust taste slightly less bitter as you fall asleep, stone chips still in your sleeves, the faint echo of hammer on chisel vibrating in your bones. Just before dawn, someone shoves a bundle into your arms and says, "You've been moved up." At first, you assume it's a mistake or punishment, but no, you've been assigned to the lime crew. It sounds harmless, lime pleasant, zesty. You imagine citrus, something clean. It is not that kind of lime. This lime is white, dusty, and terrifyingly caustic. It comes from baking limestone at extreme heat until it becomes powdered aggression. The result is quickly a pale, chalky substance that hisses and smokes. When water touches it, you're told very clearly, don't get it on your skin. The man telling you has no eyebrows. He stirs a pit of the stuff with a long paddle and looks like he's seen horror's blistered hands, possibly exploding barrels. The lime kiln sits on the far edge of the site. Near woods, no one camps, and the smoke never clears, and everything smells like burnt bones. It's a massive round oven of brick and stone, with a pit inside for stacking limestone and feeding fuel timber or charcoal. The fire's burned for days. The heat radiating from it feels less like warmth, more like retribution. Your job? Help with slaking. That means mixing dry quicklime with water to create slaked, lima pasty mortar ingredient used in nearly every part of the build. Mortar, plaster, even whitewash. It's the glue holding walls together. But slaking isn't cooking, it's chemical warfare. The moment water hits the powder, it steams, hisses, bubbles. You step back, instinctively, but not fast enough. A fine cloud hits your face. Your nose burns. Your eyes water. Your throat closes like you've inhaled fire ants. Older workers move with practiced grace stirring in slow circles. Faces wrapped in damp cloths, eyes squinted against smoke. One says deadpan that he went blind for a week after lime splashed. In his eyes during a rainstorm came back, he says, but colors never looked the same after. You understand now why the lime crew is a grim elite. Everyone walks like they've learned respect the hard way. By midday, Your tunic is soaked with sweat and splashes. Your gloves stiffen with crusted lime. The white dust gets everywhere, hair, ears, even behind your teeth. Your fingertips tingle. Unpleasantly, an older man hands you wool to wrap your hands. You didn't bring extra cloth, so you tear a piece from your undershirt. A breeze kicks up, and suddenly you're caught in a swirl of lime dust. It clings like angry snow. You cough, eyes shut, tasting metal, bitterness, wrongness. Someone laughs. Full initiation, they say. You push through. Eventually, the lime slakes into a proper paste. It's scooped into wooden tubs and carried to the masons. Some will be used today. Some aged-older mortar set stronger, believe it or not. Masons debate this passionately. Some swear by weeks-old mix. Others insist fresh is best. A fringe theory from an apprentice who perpetually smells of goose fat is that some masons added egg whites or blood to strengthen mortar. You don't know if it's true, but you did hear someone joke about a chicken vanishing during last week's mix. Later, you're assigned to coat a wall section with plaster, hauling lime-heavy slurry up a wobbly ladder and flinging it against stone with a flat board. It sticks in globs, slowly smoothing into a pale crust. Your lungs tighten from the chalky air. No masks exist. The best you can do is wet a cloth and tie it over your nose. And here's what makes you pause. All this labor's slaking, mixing, hauling goes into something most will never notice. Mortar isn't flashy. It's not carved or painted, but without it, every stone would tumble. Lime is what makes castles possible. The sun dips. The heat fades. The burning in your arms remains. You sit by the killas. It glows a flickering, half-dead star. Someone passes you a jug of ale. Awful stuff, warm, sour, but you drink it anyway. It cuts the taste of lime and exhaustion, if only for a moment. You watch flames flicker inside the kiln and feel the sting of lime on your wrists where your gloves ended. It'll blister, maybe scar. You don't care. You just hope your hands work tomorrow. As the fire pops and hisses, someone asks what you did before this. You pause. Everything before feels vague. You mutter something about sheep, maybe true, maybe not, doesn't matter. Now you're part of the lime crew, part of the engine that turns dead stone into living walls. You cough, rub your sleeve across your nose, and glance toward the half-built tower in the distance. You'll be back. They're soon slathering this caustic goop between stones. Ceiling gaps, giving the structure bones. The skin on your forearms feels tight. Tomorrow, you'll itch, burn, breathe more dust. But for now, you sit beside the fire and breathe the smoke bee, 'cause it's better than lime. Just barely. You wake to creaking wood and swearing. Never a good sign. It's still dark, the pre-dawn gray that warps time. Something's wrong. You throw on your boots now, stiff with dried lime and mud, and stumble toward the shouting. There it is. The scaffolding on the north wall leans at an unnatural angle. A single timber has buckled at the base. The whole structure lists like a drunk trying to stand straight. Before you're fully awake, someone jabs a finger at you, yelling for ropes. Braces anything to stop collapse. You run, grab a thick coil, and help secure the beam. It holds, for now, too close. So today's lesson isn't stonework or lime. It's scaffolding, the miracle of vertical regret. If you've never wondered how medieval builders reached towering walls, it's because ballads never mention the terrifying mess of wooden poles, planks, and prayer that made it possible. You'll spend your shift 30 feet up, balanced on boards barely wider than your shoulders, hauling buckets of mortar and stone. You climb slowly, one creaking rung at a time, fingers white-knuckling the rope as boards shift under your boots. No safety harness, no clever counterweights, just centuries of bad decisions tied with knots that may or may not hold. At the platform, you realize how temporary it all feels. Planks bow under your weight. Wind cuts through your tunic like a surrender flag. You glance down and immediately regret it. The courtyard looks like a toy. One loose board, one misstep, and you'd fall face first into a future as part of the wall you're building. But work doesn't care about your fear of heights. You haul mortar up, stone down, rinse, repeat. A pulley helps barely. Mostly, it's muscle and coordination. Worst part, hand signals. The team below can't hear you, so you wave, point, nod, pray. Misread one gesture, and you'll either wait 10 minutes for the wrong tool, or nearly lose your head to a flying chisel. As you settle in, you notice the scaffolding's logic. Vertical posts are standards, horizontals are ledgers, cross braces keep it from becoming a game of pick-up sticks. Everything's tied with ropes, wedges, clamps, none meant to last weeks, let alone months. A worker beside you, mortar bucket between his knees, tells of a mason who fell 3 stories onto lime bags and survived with only a broken leg. They called him Lucky Tommen till he died 6 months later when another scaffold collapsed. Nobody calls anyone lucky anymore. Scaffold accidents are more common than admitted. Wood rots in rain, nails loosen with vibration. People forget to retie lashings. You've heard whispers of entire wall sections giving way in storms, screaming messes of dust and splinters. Yet here you are, inching along a platform no wider than bread, balancing stones in one hand, gripping a groaning beam with the other. At some point, you stop thinking about how far you'd fall and start thinking about how not to fall. You move slowly, deliberately, plant each foot like it's being judged. Then the wind picks up. A stiff breeze becomes a gale. Planks rattle. Someone yells but you can't hear. A bucket swings wildly. The platform wobbles like it's laughing. You drop to a crouch, gripping a beam, heart pounding. The worker beside you shrugs, spits off the edge, and says, "Worst last week." Apparently, high wind is routine and so is pretending it doesn't matter. You're beginning to think the entire crew runs on equal parts courage and denial. But it gets better. Once the wind dies and your hands stop shaking, you start to appreciate the view. From up here, you see the whole site, the walls, layout, tower placements, the chaos below. It all makes sense. You spot your old lime pit, recognize quarry crew hauling stone. For a moment, you're not just a pawn, you're part of the grand plan. The feeling doesn't last. You're called to help shift a long timber into place for a scaffold extension. 4 of you hoist it up, maneuver it, lash it down. Midway, a rope snaps. The beam crashes onto the platform with a bone-breaking sound. No one's hurt, but everyone freezes. You share a look that says, "We won't get this lucky again." The rest of the shift passes in tense silence. You finish the extension, retie every knot, double-check supports. By day's end, your legs shake, not just from exhaustion, but from the slow realization of how fragile it all is. At dinner, everyone's quiet. A splinter cut your wrist. Your ankles ache from balancing on uneven boards for hours. Someone asks, "What happens if the scaffold falls?" You answer honestly, "You'd be a stain." No one laughs. Quirky fact. Some master masons included scaffolding drawings in their plans, not for safety, but to avoid arguments with carpenters. Blaming each other was a beloved medieval pastime. Scholars debate how advanced these systems really were. Some say they used mathematical ratios. Others think it was all eyeballed and held together with hope. Based on today, you'd bet on the latter. That night, lying in your tent, you realize something odd. The scaffold didn't fall. You didn't drop anything. You didn't even puke from the heights. You made it through. Tomorrow, you'll climb again, because the wall won't finish itself. It starts raining before dawn. Not gentle mist, but the kind of sideways deluge that soaks you in 5 minutes and turns every path to soup. You lie in your tent, watching canvas sag under pooling water, wondering if they'll cancel work. A peasant snow day. You wait, hope, then someone shouts, "Up and out." Rain or not, there goes that fantasy. You drag yourself into boots, now heavier with caked mud. Outside, the world is a squelching mess. Tents collapse, fire pits drown. An ox has lain down in protest, and honestly, you sympathize. You trudge toward the build site, slipping in muck with every other step. The place looks like a failed moat. Pools fill ditches. Sand piles melt to mush. Scaffolding groans under extra weight. You wonder if anyone in the 13th century ever said, "Maybe don't build here," but work continues. Rain, snow, sleet, doesn't matter. Stone must be laid. Mortar spread. The tower won't rise by itself, even if your joints creak like you've lived in it for 70 years. The real trouble is mortar. It hates rain. Lime-based mixes don't bond when saturated. Water thins the paste, weakens joints, sometimes washes entire layers away before they set. But there's no stopping. You keep working, trowel in hand, smoothing goop into cracks and hoping it holds. It doesn't, single quotes, within hours. Yesterday's work crumbles. One wall slumps into a bulge, like a wet cake collapsing. The master mason stomps around, muttering nonsensical threats. "Heads will roll," he says, pointing at a perfectly fine corner. No one argues. It's easier to nod and look sorry. You're assigned to trench duty, digging out drains clogged by runoff. No gutters exist yet, and the site slopes downhill from the woods. Every tree now acts as a faucet, pouring water into your life. You plunge your spade into mud, carving a channel to divert floodwater from the southern wall. After an hour, your hands are raw, knees soaked, but the puddle shrinks to a pool. That's success here. At some point, you look up to see a mule break loose from its tether and sprint across the yard like it's late for a joust. It skids, nearly topples a lime tub, and vanishes into the woods. No one reacts. Just another Tuesday. Older masons talk, weather like family drama, long-suffering, annoyed but resigned. They recall last year's great thaw, when warm rain turned the east wall into a mudslide. One man lost a boot and never found it. Still in the wall, maybe, he says, like that's normal. A fringe story circulates. A castle in Ireland where builders, fed up with water damage, rerouted an entire river through the Lord's hunting lodge. You're not sure it's true, but it sounds like the petty revenge you'd aspire to if you ever escaped ditch duty. Back at the tower, scaffolding turns slick. Two men nearly lose grip on a bucket of stone chips. One falls a few feet enough to knock the wind out and leave him limping. Everyone's extra cautious now. Rain makes everything heavier, slipperier, deadlier. Even oxen hesitate, hooves sliding on the cobbled ramp to the upper supply tier. A quiet camaraderie grows on days like this. Misery binds people. You exchange glances with the trench crew, share a crude joke about castle swimming, and get back to digging. No one's dry, no one's happy, but at least you're miserable together. You try to remember what dry feels like, what a warm fire sounds like. You imagine a feast hall with roasting meat and dry socks. You're not even hungry, just fixated on the socks. By mid-afternoon, the rain eases enough that you can lift your head without feeling baptized. You help repair the damaged wall, packing fresh mortar into gaps with fingers too numb to feel anything but cold. The master mason hovers like a buzzard, eyes sharp for signs of shoddy work. You move slowly, deliberately. Rain drips down your face. It's hard to tell what's water and what's sweat. There's an argument between two apprentices about whether the foundation should have been dug deeper to begin with. Something about clay density and capillary action, which is frankly way above your pay grade. But it's a reminder that a single bad decision made months ago could be why you're scooping muddy disaster out of a trench right now. Some scholars argue medieval builders knew far more about soil, drainage, and weatherproofing than we give them credit for. Others think it was mostly trial and error. Build, watch it sink, build again but slightly more uphill. Honestly, it feels like both can be true at once. By the time the sun finally breaks through the thick gray clouds, you're ankle-deep in brown water, and your sleeves are stained with something that might be mold. Your skin feels soft in the worst possible way, as if squeezing your hand too hard might leave it permanently folded. Still, progress is progress. The trench is holding. The wall patch looks passable. The mule hasn't returned, but no one's surprised. Back at camp, a rare fire has been coaxed to life using pitch-soaked bark and what feels like half a barrel of bad decisions. You huddle near it, holding your hands to the warmth, steam rising off your clothes like a slow exorcism. You don't talk much. There's just the crackle of flame, the distant hoot of an owl, and the low murmur of exhausted breathing. Someone coughs, someone snores. The rain has stopped, but you know it'll be back. You wonder, not for the first time, if the people who will eventually live in this castle will ever think about you about days like this. Hours lost to water, mud, and aching joints. Probably not. But you'll know, because you were the one who had to dig a moat every time the sky cried. You don't remember when the word laborer stopped sounding like a temporary role and started feeling like a life sentence. Somewhere between your 5th week of trench work and your first bad case of hand blisters, the label just stuck. You're a castle builder now, not a skilled mason, not a carpenter, just a body that carries, hauls, lifts, and occasionally bleeds. And for most people around you, that's more than enough to count as a good life. Today starts like most others. Someone yelling, someone throwing something, someone else stepping in something they wish they hadn't. But there's a shift in the mood, a ripple you sense as soon as you reach the main site. The foreman's face is more pinched than usual. The master mason scribbles furiously on a wax tablet, while two well-dressed outsiders argue near the southern wall. One shakes a small coin pouch like it's evidence, then it clicks. Pay. Some you stand off to the side, watching. The skilled masons line up first. They hand over tallies, chisel marks scratched into stones, initials stamped into mortar, seems proof of work done. The overseer checks the marks against a ledger and counts out coins. The sound of silver clinking into hands is distant, almost foreign. You don't even get in line. Unskilled workers like you aren't here for wages. You're here because your Lord said so, here to pay off rent you can't afford with labor you never agreed to. Or maybe you're part of the rotational labor system corvée, where each peasant household comes someone to the site for a week or a month to help. Help meaning break your back so the upper classes don't have to. The men in fancy cloaks aren't here to thank you. They're arguing over how much the Mason Guild is charging for a decorative arch they still haven't finished. You go back to work, stomach growling. Lunch, when it comes, is a turnip, stale bread, and thin soup that tastes like someone waved a carrot over hot water and called it a day. You eat fast, standing. There's no dining hall for mess tent. You sit on a stone if you're lucky, on your own feet if you're not. The rule is simple: eat quick or don't eat. The birds and rats are waiting in, they're faster than they look. One guy says he got a boiled egg in his sack today. Someone stole it before he finished the story. You laugh kind of. It's not like you weren't warned. The castle site runs on a strict hierarchy. You're near the bottom, just above the animals and slightly below the latrine. Skilled masons sit at the top, followed by carpenters, blacksmiths, and stonecutters. They get coin, they get respect. Sometimes they even eat indoors. You get crumbs, scraped knuckles, and the vague hope of survival. Worse, even the skilled are frustrated. Pay comes irregularly. Supplies get delayed. Lords change their minds about designs halfway through construction, meaning you tear down what you just built. One week, the master wants a straight tower. The next, he's seen around one on a noble's hunting trip, and now everyone's working double to change the layout, and you'd better do it fast. If the Lord inspects the site and doesn't like what he sees, heads won't roll, but you might spend the next 2 weeks digging the new outhouse trench. Back on the wall, you're tasked with helping a carpenter lift a new hoarding beam into place. Hoardings are wooden platforms jutting from the tops of walls, useful for dropping rocks, boiling oil, or rude gestures on anyone foolish enough to attack. The beams are thick, heavy, built to support armored men. That means you and 3 others must hoist each one using ropes, sweat, and creative profanity. The carpenter doesn't like working with laborers. You can tell by how he mutters every time you miss a signal or lift too slow. But by the hour's end, the hoarding frame is in place and no one's crushed. That's a win in your book. By mid-afternoon the sun returns, which means the dust returns. It coats everything: your skin, your clothes, your thoughts. The mortar dries too fast. The lime turns crumbly. Masons start yelling about someone watering it down too much. You just keep moving, eyes on the stone in front of you. Muscles numb from repetition, and yet, despite everything, you can't help but glance up now and then. The walls are rising slowly, unevenly, but rising. The tower that once seemed like an impossible dream now casts a shadow long enough to reach the lime pit. You know it's not done, not even close. But it's taller than you, taller than any nearby tree, and you helped do that back at camp. The talk turns to theft. Someone's missing a cloak. Someone else found a half-eaten pie near their tent that definitely wasn't there. Tent that definitely wasn't theirs. There's quiet grumbling, the kind that builds into fists if left unchecked. It's what happens when people are tired, hungry, and overworked. There's no justice system here, just social pressure and the occasional mob-style punishment. The last thief, caught sneaking rations, was tied to a post with a sign reading "Rat" on his back. He wasn't seen again. No one asked where he went. As the fire crackles that night and the sky shifts from gold to deep bruised blue, you sit, with your knees pulled up, staring at your hands. They're hardening into tools. You feel calluses spreading, cracks deepening, your grip tightening without thought. You're no mason, but you're not just a peasant anymore either. You're part of this, part of the thing slowly becoming stone and sky. Still, you wonder if the castle is finished. The Lord holds his feast, and nobles ride in from miles around. Will anyone say this wall was built by hands that bled turnip soup? Probably not, but that's okay. You'll know, and so will the stones. The next day greets you with a dull thud to the ribs from the guy who sleeps 2 feet away and kicks in his dreams. You grunt, roll over, and rub your side, wondering if it's still bruised from yesterday's hoarding beam. Probably. Everything is bruised at this point. Even your dreams feel sore. The sky is the color of dishwater. Wind howls through tent guy ropes, kicking straw across camp like the ghost of some angry goat herder. But today you're getting a break, or so the foreman claims. When he tells you you're on the midday supply shift and won't be working the wall, you raise an eyebrow, suspicious. He just shrugs and walks off, chewing something that crunches far too loudly to be food. Turns out your break means loading and distributing meals. Lunch duty. And in case no one's told you yet, medieval lunch isn't exactly something you want remembered for. There's no kitchen staff, no cheery cooks in aprons, just a couple of large kettles, bread so hard it could double as building material, and a rotating group of unlucky souls. Today, you doling out the day's meal. It's a mixture of root, vegetables boiled to collapse, the occasional trace of meat rat, squirrel, horse, who's to sand a sprinkle of herbs if someone got lucky scavenging near the woods. It smells like wet rope and tastes like what moss probably feels like. But it's warm and filling, in that's treasure here. You lug a sloshing bucket of stew up to the scaffold crew, navigating the same nightmare ladder you nearly slipped off 2 days ago. This time, you're one-handed balancing the bucket in the crook of your arm while gripping the rope with the other. Half the stew slops out by the time you reach the top, but nobody complains. They're too hungry to care. The crew sits with legs dangling over the platform edge, eating with fingers, spoons, or flat pieces of wood sharpened into makeshift tools. One guy dips his bread in stew and uses it like a sponge. Another drinks straight from the ladle. No one speaks much, just slurping and chewing. It's oddly peaceful in a gritty, uncomfortable kind of way. You sit with them for a minute, legs dangling too, watching the landscape stretch beyond the walls, the forest, distant hills, a small village that sends workers every few weeks. There's something strangely beautiful about it, tall, soft, and green, oblivious to the fact it's feeding labor into this hungry, stone-eating machine. You're pulled from your trance by a sudden shout from below. Thief. Tension snaps tight. You scramble down the scaffold with the others, heart pounding more from the shift in tone than urgency. A crowd forms around a young worker, barely more than a boy caught red-handed with someone else's pouch. The foreman yells. The boy cries. You recognize him. He helped unload timber last week. Quiet, quick, with a joke. Always kept his bread wrapped in linen to keep bugs off. Now he's on his knees in the mud, begging. The rules here are simple. Don't steal. Not for morality, but because it shatters the fragile peace among crews. You can work exhausted. You can work sick. But you can't work when no one trusts. The person next to them, stealing breaks that invisible thread holding everything together. The foreman doesn't even look surprised. He spits in the dirt and waves toward the gate. Gone, now. No formal punishment, no trial, just exile. And out here, being turned away from camp is a death sentence. Even if no one says it aloud, the boy doesn't argue. He stands trembling and walks past the half-built tower into the trees. He never looks back. The rest of you return to work as if that's just how things are here. Back on the wall, the mood is heavier. People speak in low voices. Eyes flick sideways. Everyone's quieter. You deliver the rest of the stew, but no one jokes anymore. You feel the weight of what you've seen, like another stone added to the pile already on your shoulders. You think about how precarious this life is. One mistake, one poor decision. You're on the outside looking in. There's no safety net, no appeals, just the sharp edge of survival. And in a world where you're only as good as your last stone, that edge cuts quick. Later that afternoon, the wind shifts sand. The smell of roasting meat drifts down from the Lord's manor. A private hunt, probably. Some feast to impress knights. Or woo a baron. You hear faint laughter, clattering plates, even a string instrument's trill. Someone's having a fine time up there, down here. You're cleaning the bottom of a stew pot with a stick, trying not to think about it. A quirky fact. Some lords had multiple kitchens, one for meat, one for fish, one for pastries, one just for feasts. Meanwhile, workers got whatever boiled in the common pot, assuming it hadn't spoiled. One French site reported workers revolting after 30 days straight of barley gruel. You can't blame them. You'd revolt after 10. And yet, despite grim meals and grimmer rules, the work moves forward. Walls rise, scaffolds climb, stones click into place, and you keep showing up, carrying stew, carrying stone, carrying the weight of those who didn't make it through. That night, the fire burns low. Someone plays a broken flute, just 3 notes, again and again. You lie back, staring at the stars, thinking about the boy who walked into the forest weather. He'll find another camp, another job, another chance. Probably not, but you hope, because one day you might need that same hope yourself. There's something about tools that makes you feel oddly connected to the past. Even when the past is trying to break your spine. They're simple, honest things. Iron heads, Wooden handles, nothing fancy. But every chip on a chisel, every worn groove on a mallet grip tells a story, probably a painful one. This morning, you're finally handed your own personal tool bundle. Not because you've earned it exactly, but because someone else cracked theirs, splitting a stubborn block. And you happened to be closest when the foreman barked for a replacement. So here you are, holding a hammer, a point chisel, and a wooden measuring stick that's only half strat, and probably lies to you every chance it gets. The tools look modest and impressive till you realize they're the only thing between a solid wall and a collapsing pile of rock. No power tools, shortcuts, just leverage, patience, and good aim. You're assigned to a mason team not as a full mason, of course, but as a kind of sidekick. You fetch stones, wet the mortar, keep the workspace clear. But the perk, you get to watch real craftsmanship up close. The way a mason reads a block is almost poetic. He taps the edge, listens to the sound, then positions the chisel just right before striking. Never too hard, never too soft. It's a rhythm that looks like art. You try not to look too impressed. The lead mason today is a wiry man named Emmerich. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's either a cutting insult or a fact about stones. See this one, he says, holding up a perfectly square block. Reigate stone cut, soft, hardens with age, finicky, but it sings when you shape it right. Then he moves on, as if he didn't just recite stone poetry. You practice shaping your first block and it goes poorly. You hit too hard, the chisel skids, and you shave off a chunk that leaves the face uneven. Emmerich takes the tool and reshapes the edge with a few clean strikes. Don't force it, he mutters. The stone already knows what it wants. You're just persuading it. That's either deep wisdom or he's inhaled too much mortar dust. Maybe both. The tools themselves are strangely fragile for how vital they are. Chisels dull quickly and need constant sharpening. Mallets crack if used wrong. A measuring rope stretches in heat and messes up your layout by inches, which becomes feet, which becomes a tower, leaning like it's ashamed of itself. So you learn to check everything twice, then again, as you move through the day hauling tools, reshaping stones, smoothing mortar. Seems you start to notice each implement's personality. Your hammer is slightly heavier on one side. Your chisel has a nick that makes it stutter if you don't hold it just right. They're not perfect, but they're yours for now. And there's quiet pride in that. You're still just a laborer, but you're not working with your hands alone anymore. You're shaping something. Even if your stone ends up buried in a wall no one sees, you'll know it's there. Your hammer left its mark. There's even superstition in the tool culture. One worker refuses to lend his chisel, claims it goes dull in other hands. Another ties a charm around his mallet, a tiny pouch of salt, garlic, and rosemary. Keeps the curse out, he says. No one laughs. Too many have seen tools snap mid-use for no reason. Better safe than flattened. A quirky fact. Some historical masons carved little faces or symbols into favorite tools, not for decoration, but as a signature. One chisel found centuries later had a tiny fizz. But maybe one day, maybe if you keep proving you can use them without breaking anything. You're about to leave when Emmerich stops you. He hands you a stone rough, half-shaped, clearly part of something bigger. Finish it, he says. Don't make it pretty, make it fit. You blink, nod, carry the stone back to your tent like its secret treasure. That night, you work by fire, light tapping gently, slowly, letting the stone tell you where to go. It's not graceful, but it's yours. You're not just lifting anymore. You're creating, not fast, not well, but honestly, and for the first time since this whole miserable castle affair began, you feel capable. Tomorrow, the tools go back into your hands, the real ones. Not just metaphorical blisters and curses. You might not be a mason yet, but your stone is waiting. You've always known the ground beneath your feet was trouble. You just didn't know how much. Today begins with a crash knot, the kind that wakes you, but the kind that halts everything mid-progress. One moment, the southeast wall is coming together nicely, stones clicking into place, mortar holding tight. The next, it slumps like a wet blanket, the corner section yawning open as though the castle itself had second thoughts. No one's hurt, barely, but a whole day's work crumbles into crooked stones and embarrassment. A silence follows more dangerous than any shouting. Everyone freezes, waiting for the master mason's verdict. He approaches slowly, eyes narrowed, one hand trailing along the fallen wall like he's examining a body for betrayal. Water, he mutters finally. Water in the base. And just like that, your new job for the week is digging holes around the castle instead of in it. You're on drainage duty. Sounded like problem solving. In practice, it's you, a shovel, and deep puddles that smell like rotten eggs and disappointment. You're told to find where water's collecting and help it go away. That's the entire instruction. Medieval engineering at its finest. So you dig. Beside the fallen wall, behind the storage shed, into what seems like solid ground until it squatches and collapses into a mini-well. Every hole reveals the same problem. Water pooling just below the surface, waiting to wreak havoc. The land slopes gently toward the center, perfect for collecting. Water right under the foundations you're trying to keep dry. It's a common issue in medieval builds, especially when someone picks a scenic patch between two creeks. Beautiful, yes. Practical, not remotely. The master mason spends the afternoon pacing, arguing with the foreman about grading and soil stability. You overhear snippets clay, not draining, something about a French drain. You don't know who this French guy is, but you already don't like him, eventually. Someone marks a path for a new trench one to carry water from the tower's foundation out toward the eastern field. You and 6 others are tasked with digging it. It's about a foot wide, 2 feet deep hand, constantly collapsing before you can line it. And here's the kicker. There's no lining available. No stone, no gravel. Not even straw. So you use what? You have wooden boards from old scaffolding and broken pottery. It's make do or fail. And failure means another wall falling, possibly with someone underneath. As you dig, you grasp how fragile the whole operation is. You've been told these castles are mighty, impenetrable, built to last centuries, but here you are, one sloppy water channel from watching the Great Hall tilt like a wounded ship. The myth of invincibility, built on soggy dirt. There's open debate among scholars about how much medieval builders truly understood drainage. Some say master masons had deep, instinctive knowledge passed through generations. Others say they learned mostly through disaster. Build, flood, rebuild, repeat, judging by your mud-streaked arms. The disaster method is still alive and well. You learn to identify soil types. Sandy patches are ideal, water runs through. Clay is the worst. It clings to your shovel, holds water like a cup, and smells like the inside of an old boot when disturbed. You grow to hate clay. At one point, someone suggests a soak pita deep hole filled with rubble to collect and slowly drain water. You try it. It floods within an hour. The wrong spot, the mason says. You'd like to pick his spot, preferably off a ledge. Midway, it starts to rain again, of course. Not a downpour, just that sneaky drizzle that soaks everything while pretending to be harmless. You keep digging, boots squelching, sleeves stuck to your arms. Trench walls sag inward. You scramble to keep the channel open, sloshing water out with whatever you find, helmets mostly. One poor apprentice slips into the pit and emerges like a creature from a cautionary tale. Despite everything, some progress is made. A portion of the trench holds. Water flows sluggishly toward the eastern slope. Someone cheers. You allow yourself the smallest nod of satisfaction before a nearby stone block shifts ominously, reminding everyone the job is far from done. And that's the thing with castle construction. It's never finished. Even done parts need constant maintenance. Mortar cracks, drainage fails, foundations settle unevenly. Nature doesn't stop fighting just because a wall went up. You realize castles aren't permanent, they're persistent. There's a difference. Back at camp that night, you share a fire with a man who claims to have worked on a castle that sank, not crumbled, but sank straight into the marsh it was built over. They tried laying logs under the base, he says, eyes wide, just floated off like a duck pond. He laughs, toothless and wheezing. You laugh too, because the only other option is screaming. A fringe theory one mason brings up over dinner. Some castles were built with deliberate drainage flaws to keep workers employed and masons relevant. Can't fix what's perfect, he says, chewing his bread with menace. It's probably nonsense, but given how often the site breaks itself, you wouldn't be surprised. As the fire dies, you stare into the embers, thinking about water, how it moves, seeps into cracks, brings down stone over time. It's the quiet enemy. No battering ram, no siege tower, just patience. Tomorrow you'll finish the trencher, start another. Either way, the ground will keep testing you, and the only thing between a proud, tall castle and a puddle of regret is you and a very tired shovel. By now, you should know better than to think anything here is permanent. But even still, you're not prepared for the moment when an entire wall decides it's had enough and just gives up. It starts with a sound. Not a dramatic rumble, just a low crack like someone snapping a thick stick nearby. You're kneeling at the base of the north curtain wall. Wedging smaller stones into gaps in the mortar seems humble, mindless work. You glance up, nothing. The wall stands tall, damp in the morning light, casting its usual long shadow. Someone above mutters, dragging a rope behind them. Normal. Everything feels normal. Then another sound. Crack. Pop. The third noise isn't subtle. It's a boom, not from the sky, but from within the wall itself. Suddenly, the world jerks sideways. Masonry bursts outward, like the castle's been punched in the stomach. You barely have time to roll before a curtain of stone cascades down in a roar of dust and chaos. A section, maybe 10 feet wide, 15 tall, detaches and falls in one massive, groaning slab, exploding on the ground beside you. The noise is deafening. The air fills with choking dust. Everyone screams, "You're lucky." You know that right away. You were just far enough to escape the worst. Your leg is bruised, your tunic ripped, but you're alive. Some aren't so lucky. One of the younger workers was on the scaffold section that went with the wall. You see him half buried, legs twisted wrong, blood pooling fast. A couple of men dig him out and carry him off. He's breathing barely. You don't ask what happens next. You don't want to know. Panic gives way to silence, then shouting, then blame. The foreman screams about poor work. The master mason yells about bad mortar. Someone blames the weather. Another accuses the quarrymen of delivering brittle stone. There's yelling about the trench you helped dig last week, apparently. Water had seeped behind the wall base, softened the foundation, and pushed the whole thing outward. One guy throws his gloves down and walks off the site altogether. You hear later he returned after supper. No one leaves for real, not unless they're carried out. The next few hours are chaos. The wall is blocked off. Workers are reassigned. You're sent to salvage, picking through rubble to see what can be reused and what must be tossed. Most of it is junk now, cracked, chipped, useless. You stack the big pieces to one side. Try not to look too long at the blood on some of them. Disasters like this aren't common, but they're not rare either. You're reminded of a story someone told by the fire a few weeks ago. A castle in Brittany where the central tower collapsed during a wedding. Dozens killed, the Lord's brother among them. The Lord supposedly ordered the builder's hands removed as punishment. Hard to hold a chisel after that, the storyteller had said, smiling without humor. There's no punishment today, just silent rage. The master mason walks the perimeter like a ghost, examining every joint in the surviving wall. His lips move. You can't hear what he's saying. Probably prayers or curses. Maybe both. As you dig through the debris, you begin to appreciate how delicate this whole operation really is. A castle wall isn't just stacked stones. It's a system, a balance of weight, pressure, shape. The stones are supposed to lock together like puzzle pieces. If one slips or the mortar fails, the pressure shifts in. Suddenly you've got a pile of what used to be security. And then there's the foundation. Always the foundation. A single miscalculation about soil density. A few days of poor drainage. A patch. You begin to understand why some castles took decades to build. It's not the walls that take time, it's figuring out how not to make the same mistake twice. A fringe idea floats. The collapse wasn't natural. Someone mutters about rival lord, maybe a jealous mason from another region. It's not serious, but it spreads like gossip always does. Suddenly, everyone's looking at everyone else with sideways glances and muttered suspicions. Nothing comes of it, but the tension lingers. A broken wall is one thing, a broken crew is another. Cleanup continues well into the afternoon. You help stack fallen timbers, sort through shattered mortar, and dig out nails from the ruined scaffold section. There's a heavy finality to it, like the wall didn't just fall, it gave up. Later, a new plan is drawn. The rebuilt section will be reinforced, new stone, deeper foundation, more care with drainage. The master mason insists on hand-checking every block. The process will take longer, he says, but it will not fail again. You can almost believe him, almost as the sun sets, painting the wreckage in long shadows and fading gold. You sit by the fire, quiet. No music tonight, no jokes, just tired bodies and the distant cough of the injured apprentice who survived the fall. His tent is near yours now. You hear him at night, trying not to cry. You think about the wall, how solid it looked, how proud everyone felt just days ago when it finally reached full height. You remember laying some of those stones, pressing the mortar and smoothing the seams. You remember doing everything right, and still it fell. There's something terrifying in that. You were raised to believe castles were unbreakable fortresses of stone, immune to time and war. But now you've seen the truth. They're just another thing held together by human hands, fallible, fragile, mortal. Like you, tomorrow, you'll wake up, pick up your tools, and start rebuilding, not because you want to, but because that's the only way forward after the wall collapse. The entire mood of the site shifts. You'd expect things to slow down, maybe pause while people recover. Instead, the pace increases, as if the master mason is trying to outrun the mistake by sheer force of productivity. No one says it out loud, but everyone walks faster, lifts harder, keeps their heads down just a little more. It's not just a job now, it's reputation control. Because the worst thing that can happen on a castle site isn't death or collapse, or even losing a hand to a falling beam. It's a lord losing confidence in the people building his very expensive, very symbolic fortress. So, when you're assigned to help carve the murder holes, of all things it feels like a grim joke. They don't call them that, of course. The official name is machicolations. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? But you know better. You're building murder holes, gaps in the stonework near the tops of towers and gateways, perfect for dropping boiling oil, rocks, or if the budget's tight, just whatever's lying around onto the heads of unwelcome visitors. You'd laugh if you hadn't just seen a wall fall down by accident. Now the idea of aiming destruction seems wildly ambitious. You're working up high again near the top of the east tower. The scaffolding has been rebuilt, thicker this time, sturdier, with new braces and extra lashings. That doesn't make it feel any less rickety under your boots. You haul a fresh-cut stone block into position, guided by a mason named Gil who has 2 fingers permanently bent backward from a pulley accident, and an attitude suggesting the accident somehow made him stronger. Murder hole construction is delicate. You're essentially building a gap within a wall without weakening the wall itself. That means precise angles, tight seams, careful measurements. Each hole must line up perfectly with the overhanging platform above. You need enough space for a soldier to aim through, but not so much that enemies could shoot back. It's like designing a weapon while pretending it's just another decorative feature. The process starts with chiseling out a trough between 2 wall segments. It has to slope downward and inward, so whatever gets dropped will fall forward right where attackers will cluster. The masons check the pitch of each hole using plumb lines and measuring rods. You just haul buckets of stone chips away and try not to think about what it'll be like if someone ever actually uses these for their intended purpose. It's eerie work, not just because of the name, but because of the implication. Up until now, the castle has been about protection, thick walls, strong gates, high towers, defensive, safe. But murder holes, that's different. That's offense. That's the castle striking back. And it's not the only feature like that. Arrow slits called loopholes, another. They're narrow from the outside, but widen toward the inside, giving archers a wide firing range while remaining almost invisible to attackers. You work beside one today, chipping at the edge to clean it out. The apprentice helping you keeps sticking his arm through it like a child testing a mouse hole. He stops when Gil glares at him. You learn a lot about violence while laying stone, not just the kind that comes from war, but the kind built into the very design of a castle. The spiral staircases inside towers always twist to the right as you climb, favoring right-handed defenders who can swing swords more easily. Enemies forced upward with their right hands against the central column are at a disadvantage. Windows are placed higher than necessary, not for light, but to keep people from climbing in. Even door placement offset, narrow, angled is intended to slow, confuse, or funnel intruders into kill zones. The whole building is a trap, a beautiful, towering trap. One of the masons tells you about a castle he helped build years ago where the murder holes were covered with ornately carved stone hoods. Looked like dragon mouths, he says with pride. Real classy. Then he shrugs. Of course, they fell off the first winter frozen, cracked. Turns out building these features isn't just complicated fragile work. Water seeps into every crevice, and freeze-thaw cycles in winter make cracks expand like splinters in stone. If the angle's even slightly off, rainwater collects in the wrong place, and suddenly you're not dropping oil, you're patching leaks. There's ongoing debate among castle historians about how often murder holes were actually used. Some argue they were mostly psychological intimidation through architecture. Others claim they were essential during sieges, especially at gateways where attackers would gather. You don't have a side in the debate. You just know it's your job to make sure the next stone fits perfectly so some night, 50 years from now, someone can boil invaders in comfort. You spend the rest of the day shaping the under-platform supports for the hoarding, the wooden structures that extend out from the wall over the gates. These provide yet more opportunities for raining unpleasantness down on unwanted guests. Some castles keep these wooden structures permanently. Others only build them in times of war. Either way, the stone corbels that hold them need to be placed. Now, while there's still scaffold access, you wedge a block into position, tamp down the mortar, and brace it with 2 hands while Gil hammers the edge into place. You don't breathe. If it shifts wrong, the entire overhang will eventually collapse, but it holds. Small victory. And that's what most of this job is. Small victories strung together by blisters and luck at dinner. You sit beside the apprentice from earlier, who's still talking about the arrow slit. I never thought about how everything in a castle is built to hurt people, he says. Thought it was just walls and banners, you know. You nod because you did too, once. He asks if you think it's wrong. You don't answer not. You're avoiding it, but because you're too tired, and because the truth is complicated. The castle protects, the castle harms. It's a place of safety and threat, sanctuary and violence. It doesn't care what you think, it just is. And your job is to make sure it stands. That's all. As the stars come out, you sit back and look up at the tower wall. The murder holes are in place, now clean deadly gaps carved into perfect symmetry. It's unsettling how good they look. And it's worse when you realize you're proud of them. You've heard a lot of jokes since this whole castle thing started, mostly dark, often tasteless, always delivered with that dry edge only Bonfire men can manage. But there's one that never fails to get a laugh. Where do they keep the lords? It's not even really a joke, just a question. But every time someone asks it, usually while elbow deep in mortar, someone else chuckles and mutters, "Wherever gravity decides." Today, you find out just how true that is, because today you're assigned to latrine duty. Castle plumbing in all its early medieval glory. You thought you were done with trenches. You were wrong. You start the morning by hauling a heavy wooden panel up to the upper levels of the Keepa platform that will one day be the Lord's private chamber. It's still exposed, all beams, scaffolding, and wind. But already the design includes a narrow overhang projecting from the wall, boxed in on 3 sides with a small square opening in the floor. That, you're told, is the garderobe, a fancy name for a very basic idea. You crouch beside it, peering down through the hole. There's no bucket, no pipe, no magical channel to whisk things away. Just a long drop to the ground below. Or, if the builders are feeling ambitious, a small stone chute that angles waist outward away from the wall, which is polite, you suppose, assuming anyone walks along that side of the castle. The master mason points at the opening, then at a pile of stones, and tells you to get to work, sealing the corners with mortars so nothing leaks inside. That's the thing. That's the thing no one thinks about. Castles are supposed to keep things out, but sometimes they fail to keep the worst things in. Rain, rodents, stink, you name it. So you start mixing the thickest, stickiest mortar you've ever seen and trowel it into the gaps around the stone chute. The smell hits you before you realize why. Someone used this garderobe already, as in recently, probably the same noble who toured the site yesterday and just had to test the facilities. He didn't even wait for the walls. You gag. You work because that's the job. Most people romanticize castles, majestic halls, roaring fires, soaring towers. No one thinks about the sewage, but it's here, hiding in the corners, soaking into the stone, creating problems that last for generations. You've heard rumors of old castles abandoned because drainage failed and the cellars flooded, with years of, well, consequences. There's one worker who swears he helped dig out an ancient latrine pit in Normandy and found bones in it, not human, thankfully just chicken, though the implication is someone once tried to dispose of lunch in the same place as everything else. Waste not, want not. There's no centralized sewage system. That kind of luxury won't show up for centuries. For now, every castle makes its own arrangements. Some have chutes draining into cesspits, deep holes dug away from the main foundation. Others just let waste fall straight down the outer wall, often into a shallow trench. Over time, the smell becomes part of the architecture. You're beginning to suspect that's what gives castles their authentic, historical vibe. Later, you're reassigned to the lower levels to help build a second garderobe for the garrison. Less private, less elevated, much worse. This one feeds into a pit you dug last weekend, didn't realize why. Now you know. You lower in the last of the stone lining, angling the floor slightly so liquid runs toward the outlet. Someone helpfully reminds you that if it backs up during rain season, the garrison will be sleeping in a swamp. You love your job, And then there's the bucket system. Not all parts get fancy stone chutes. For kitchens and workshops, it's often just a bucket behind a screen emptied when full, hopefully, today. You help carry one of those buckets out of the carpenter's tent. You don't ask why it's full already. You don't make eye contact with the man who hands it to you. You just carry it down the slope and dump it into the refuse pit, gagging all the way. You start to realize how important location is, not just where the garderobes are, but how the wind moves around them. No one wants the Lord's bathroom dumping into the same breeze that wafts across the banquet hall. There's a science to it: airflow, slope, gravity. You didn't think you'd spend part of your life doing wind logistics, but here you are. You also learn the grim irony of the word garderobe. It literally means guarding clothes. The idea was that hanging garments near the latrine chute would keep moths away because of the strong ammonia scent. Sure, we'll try that next time your tunic gets holes. Just tuck it next to a stone funnel of medieval human waste and hope for the best. There's debate among modern historians about how often garderobes were cleaned. Some think staff maintained them regularly. Others argue they were largely ignored until unbearable, judging by the stains and smells still embedded in older towers. You lean toward the second theory. There's also evidence that sometimes pits were sealed off entirely and new ones dug beside them. Less maintenance, more abandonment with dignity. As the sun sets, you find yourself staring up at the castle's outer walls, tracing the tiny openings you now recognize as waste chutes. From afar, they look harmless, just narrow slots in the stone. But you know what's behind them. You helped seal those walls. You laid stone so future nobility could relieve themselves in comfort. It's a strange feeling. You helped build the murder holes and the toilets, the weapons and the waste. That's the reality no one puts in the songs. The castle isn't a clean monument. It's a machina, complicated, messy, stinking engine of control and survival. And tonight, when you sit near the fire and someone jokes again, where do they keep the lords? You just laugh along, because you built the chute. There's a section of the castle the others call the spine. It's not on any plan, not marked in chalk, certainly not labeled on the master mason's wax tablet. But everyone calls it that, quietly, half seriously, as if the structure itself has grown bones. The spine is the stone staircase winding up the tower's inner wall, one step at a time in a slow spiral, so tight it makes your head spin just looking at it. And today, lucky, you are assigned to work on it. Staircases seem simple. You walk on them, that's the full relationship most people have. But building one, building a medieval spiral staircase, is like stacking frustration on geometry and balancing the result on top of more frustration. The first thing you learn is that each step is its own beast. Each is cut individually by hand from thick stone blocks, then shaped into a wedge. The narrow end connects to the central newel post. The fat end curves outward to become the tread. You're given a stack of partially cut stones and a chisel and told to refine the shape of a few. The mason overseeing the work, a heavyset man named Branrick, hands you a wooden gauge and says, "If it doesn't match this curve exactly, we throw it down the hill." You squint at the gauge. It looks like a slice of bread with one corner missing. How this determines step perfection is beyond you, but you nod like you understand. For the next few hours, it's trial and error. The wedge needs to be just right, the angle precise. A single miscut means the step won't sit flush against the previous one, and that means a trip hazard. Bad enough for a peasant, but devastating if you're a knight in full armor sprinting. During a siege, then there's the central column, the newel. It's a solid core, thick with history and importance. Every step plugs into it like ribs into a spine. Some castles have hollow newels, sometimes even with secret staircases inside. Yours doesn't. Yours is a solid block of immovable pride, and the masons revere it like a sacred totem. Branrick teaches you the twist. Every step spirals upward, slightly offset from the last, creating the staircase's signature turn, and always to the right, always clockwise, an architectural advantage. Most attackers are right-handed. Defenders running down have the open arc on their right, swinging swords with ease. Attackers coming up have their sword arms trapped against the inner wall. Clever, vicious design. You begin helping the team set the lower steps. Each is seated in mortar, tested for weight, and adjusted with a small lead hammer until level. Then the next is added above it, overlapping slightly. It's not fast, it's not fun, it's fussy. You carry buckets of mortar, haul stones, and wedge your body into the spiral space to brace things from below. At one point, Bronrick yells down from above, "If you drop that, it's bouncing all the way to the kitchen." You grip the stone tighter, your arms burn. The spiral seems to suck light inward like a tunnel to nowhere. There's an argument. The master mason wants wider steps, easier for the garrison to run up. But wider means shallower, and that changes the angle. More stone, more shaping, more labor. The masons groan. The foreman grumbles. Eventually, a compromise is made. As always, you redo 3 steps you'd just finished during lunch. You sit on the new base, chewing dry bread and watching the staircase curve upward, still unfinished. One of the apprentices sits nearby and tells a story about a spiral stair that twisted the wrong direction left-handed by accident. The Lord didn't notice until halfway through building. He was left-handed himself, so it actually worked for him. But when his brother came to visit and couldn't fight his way up during a skirmish, well, awkward inheritance situation. You ask what happened. Stairs stayed. Brother didn't, the apprentice says with a shrug. The afternoon brings more hauling. You help raise a finished tread using a pulley rig, one of those medieval contraptions that makes everything feel like it's about to snap. The rope creaks, the stone sways. You and 2 others try to guide it into place as it dangles stubborn as a mule. Finally, it lands. Not smoothly, not gracefully, but it lands. You feel every muscle in your back protest. There's a strange satisfaction in seeing the steps rise. With each one placed, the staircase becomes more real, more spine, less sketch. You climb the newly set steps slowly, each still drying, each holding a little of your sweat in its mortar joints. It's beautiful in its own grim way, tight, functional, deadly if used right. And there's a quirk you hadn't noticed before. The steps get slightly narrower the higher you go, just enough to create a sense of compression. It's intentional, makes attackers feel trapped, slows momentum, forces them into a tight file. Psychological warfare built into stone. You think about that for a while at camp. You rub your hands red and raw from chisel work. Someone asks what you worked on today. The stairs, you say. They nod, then ask, if you noticed how each step is just a little off, not wrong, exactly, but subtly imperfect. A tiny curve, a slight tilt, almost like the staircase itself is resisting perfection. Stairs don't want to be climbed, the man says with a grin, then wanders off to find a crust of cheese. A fringe belief among old builders is that stairs are a trick space, twisting, turning, disorienting by nature. Some say ghosts get stuck on them. Others claim improperly built spiral stairs can confuse time. Whatever that means, you chalk it up to superstition, but as you sit by the fire and stretch your aching legs, you admit there's something You helped shape it. You carved the wedge. You hauled the stone. Tomorrow, someone will walk those steps, maybe a noble, maybe a knight, maybe a thief sneaking up in the dark, and whether they rise or fall, that's between them and the twist. It happens just after midday, during a lull, one of those rare stretches where work slows, shouting fades, and everyone settles into that quiet rhythm of labor, so routine, it almost feels like peace. The sky is clearer, rare tree tanned, the sun warms the scaffolding just enough to make the stone dry faster than usual. You're back on the outer wall, smoothing mortar between a fresh row of blocks, thinking about nothing more important than the blister forming below your thumb. You don't see it happen. You hear it. It's not the thunderclap sound you might imagine, not the grand noise of cinema or legend. It's a crack, small at first, almost like a log splitting in half, then another, then a shout sharp, sudden. That's when you look up and see the scaffolding tremble. Then a body falls. It doesn't scream. On the way down, just drops, limp and silent. A rag doll that lands with a crunch that stops everyone cold. A breathless pause overtakes the sight. Hammers freeze mid-swing. Someone lets go of a rope and it slithers uselessly to the ground. You stand there, trowel in hand, staring at the broken shape just a few yards away. It was Davon. You didn't know him well, but well enough. He worked with the hoarding crew, always tied his tools to his belt with bits of colored rope. Yellow today, it's still there fluttering around his waist like a flag of surrender. The master mason arrives. A moment later, red-faced and shouting, asking for witnesses. No one speaks at first. Then someone mumbles, the plank gave out. Another swears he saw a knot loosen on the lashings. A few just shake their heads. No one's sure. The only thing certain is that Davon is dead. And then come the questions. Did he tie off? Was the scaffolding inspected? Was it built by the right crew? None of those questions matter now. You're sent to help carry the body, carefully wrapped in canvasy way, from the build site. Not out of respect, out of practicality. No one wants death lingering near the walls. You and another worker lift the bundle and walk it to the edge of the woods. A shallow grave will be dug later. No ceremony, no priest, just a hole, a marker if someone remembers. And maybe a whispered name if anyone can still say it without breaking. You return to the wall, your arms shaking not from the weight, but from something colder, something heavier. Death isn't new here. You've seen crushed fingers, split hands, even a man lose a foot to a dropped beam. But this is different. Davon was young, fast, careful. If he could fall, anyone could, including you. There's a strange silence afterward, the kind where people start moving again. But no one speaks above a whisper. Work resumes because it has to, but everyone moves differently. Slower, more deliberate, with a weariness that wasn't there before. You keep checking your footing. You test every plank before stepping. You triple check the knots on the pulley ropes. You're assigned to help patch the wall section Devon was working on. There's a dark smear on the stone. Below, blood or mortar, maybe both. You scrub it with water before you start. No one tells you to. It just feels necessary. A veteran stonemason nearby breaks the silence with a half-muttered story about a castle build he worked on in Wales, where 3 men died in 1 week. One fell, one was crushed, one vanished, just disappeared. Thought. He went home. Then we found his body under the lime pile. No one noticed. He doesn't laugh. No one does. That's the truth. No one puts in the stories. Every castle wall has a body count, not from battle, but from building. And yet there's no record, no plaques, no lists. These workers don't get statues, just unmarked graves buried in the shadow of the thing that killed them. There's a debate among historians, there always is, about how dangerous castle construction really was. Some argue it wasn't that deadly, pointing to payroll records and guild protections. Others say the silence itself is proof. You don't write down every cracked rib, every crushed finger. You don't note every man who limped home and never returned. But you live it. You feel it in your spine each time you climb a scaffold. In your hands when a stone slips. In your gut when someone doesn't show up for dinner and no one asks why. You finish patching the wall just before sunset. The last stone settles in and you smear the final line of mortar with tired hands. It holds. It looks clean. No sign of the fall remains. No trace that Devon ever stood there. Back at camp, the men are quieter than usual. The laughter is forced. The songs don't start. One man drinks too much and throws up behind the water barrels. Another just sits and stares at his hands. You join the circle by the fire, but no one talks about what happened. Not directly. Not yet. You lie down early, staring at the stars, your muscles aching, your fingers raw. You try not to picture it, the fall, the stillness, but your mind replays it anyway. You wonder what Devon dreamed about when he started here. Maybe he thought he'd be a mason one day. Maybe he wanted to save enough coin to marry, buy land, raise pigs far from all this. Maybe he just didn't want to die forgotten. You think of the tower he helped build, the steps he helped carve, the beams he raised, and now the wall holds without him. Tomorrow you'll climb the scaffold again. You'll test the planks. You'll tie your rope, and you'll keep going because that's what the living do. Even when the wall remembers more than the people ever will. You knew it would take a while. Everyone said it from the start, like a kind of warning disguised as wisdom. Castles aren't built in a day, one's muttered, often with a bitter laugh. What they didn't say, what no one says out loud, is that they're not really built in a lifetime either. Not yours, at least. And today, that truth hits hard. The tower you've worked on since it was barely more than a chalk outline on the dirt now casts a shadow long enough to reach across the yard. Its shape is finally, truly visible, an actual thing, not just a dream wrapped in scaffolding. But even as it rises, the rest of the castle stretches endlessly outward. Unfinished walls curl around foundations. Half-dug cellars sit like pits. In a battlefield, the gatehouse isn't even started yet. The curtain walls lag far behind schedule. The stonemason you began with is already dead, and the apprentice who replaced him barely has stubble. You're standing in the middle of what might be one of the largest projects of your generation, and you're beginning to realize you'll never see it finished. That stings more than you expected. Not that you ever thought this would be quick work, but there's something about actually feeling it, feeling your own limits up against the sheer weight of this place that grinds down your sense of purpose. You're not building a castle. You're building a part of one end. Someone else, maybe your own son or someone else's grandson, will finish it. Maybe it's a multi-generational build, the kind of endeavor that outlasts its own workers, the kind of thing where timelines are measured, not in months or seasons, but in decades and dynasties. And in this moment, you don't know whether to feel proud of that or exhausted by it. Today, your task is as repetitive as they come. You're working on the battlements, setting capstones along the top of the outer wall, shaping each into that classic jagged silhouette. Crenellations up, down, a pattern of stone teeth meant for archers to duck behind while returning fire. You shape, set, smooth, and move on. The sky brightens, a cloud passes. Then another, and you're still standing on the same wall, nudging a block into place with a chisel and a soft grunt. Beside you, a much younger worker hums a song you don't recognize. He doesn't speak much, only started last week, doesn't even know the names of all the tools yet, but he smiles a lot. He asks questions. He looks up at the tower with a kind of wide-eyed hope you remember having once before the injuries, before the funerals, before the realization that you'd spend years building a castle that might never host a single feast. He asks, how long until it's done? You shrugged. He pushes, 5 years. You laugh, not meanly, just at the idea. 10. You shake your head. 20. You look up at the tower, now maybe halfway done, and murmur, if you're lucky. He's quiet. After that, the hum stops to lighten the mood. You tell him about the castle in Normandy that was started under one king and finished under his great-grandson. Took nearly 90 years, changed hands 3 times. Half the workers died before the curtain wall was complete. Another castle in England took 124 years to finish, and even then, only because a war forced it to be. Build faster or die trying, you say, trying to make it sound like a joke. It's not. There's an open debate among the crew these days about whether this castle will ever be finished. The lord who commissioned it has aged since breaking ground. He visits less often. His son, when he shows up, walks the grounds with a kind of distracted frown, clearly less enchanted by stone walls and murder holes than his father. You've heard whispers that the money's tight, that priorities have changed, that the project might be scaled back or abandoned. But you keep working, because what else is there? There's a strange comfort in the work, even now. The act of building something bigger than yourself, something that might stand long after your bones are dust. That's the hope, anyway. You remember your first day, when you carried buckets of lime with trembling arms and thought this place looked like a battlefield. It still does, in some ways, but now the chaos makes sense. The walls curve for a reason. The scaffolding creaks in familiar patterns. The stones feel like they bellow. A quirky fact comes to mind. Some castles were never meant to be finished. They were political statements built just enough to show power, then left as noble ruins. Some historians believe a few lords exaggerated their building timelines on purpose, knowing the process of construction kept people loyal. As long as the walls kept rising, the dream stayed alive. You wonder if that's what's happening here. If the point isn't to finish the castle, to show that the Lord has resources, influence, a vision that stretches into generations. You look over the wall, across the fields to the distant road. A supply wagon approaches slowly. It's led by a man older than you, wearing a patched cloak and looking more like a walking shovel than a human being. He waves as he passes. You wave back, another stone goes into place. Another inch of wall rises. The wind picks up slightly on. You can feel it cutting through the crenellations just the way it's supposed to, channeling airflow so arrows can fly truer, so archers can breathe without being exposed. It's working already. Even half finished, the castle is learning how to be what it's meant to become at the end of the day. You climb down from the wall and wipe your hands on your tunic. You feel the weight of your tools in your pouch, the dull ache in your knees, the slight limp from an old drop that never quite healed. You walk past the tower. It's bigger now, still not done, maybe never will be. But you touch the base stone as you pass fingers trailing across a spot you helped shape, helped place, helped mortar into history. You nod, then keep walking. The irony hits you just after a meal as you're hoisting a bundle of freshly cut timber toward the new boarding platform and squinting at a distant speck on the horizon that's slowly, very slowly, getting bigger. Because after years of this back, knee snapping, spirit grinding, construction after 1,000 days of scaffolding, stonework, scaffolding again, mortar mixing, drainage failures, weather delays, and the occasional death by falling object, the castle is finally starting to resemble the thing it was meant to be. And someone's already coming to tear it down. You don't panic. Not at first. That takes a few minutes. You keep working as the distant figure grows clearer, then multiplies. Horses, flags, a group of maybe a dozen riders moving toward the site from the southern road at a steady pace. No farmer rides like that tanned. No local noble travels with that many retainers, unless he's either making a point or making trouble. The master mason notices around the same time you do. He stands up from a layout sketch, squints at the road, and scowls with the kind of seasoned frustration that says, "Of course this is happening now." Someone mutters the obvious, "Inspectors." The word itself feels like an insult because, in the hierarchy of people who can ruin your day without lifting a single stone, castle inspectors rank just below God and slightly above plague doctors. These are men appointed by the Lord, or worse, by the king, to check on progress, which usually means pointing at things they don't understand and demanding that someone redo them. They arrive in the afternoon. There are 3 of them, one in rich robes with ink-stained fingers, one in chainmail, clearly a knight with a personal distaste for smiling, and the third, a short, twitchy man with a rolled-up parchment and a smirk that makes you want to gently tip him into the nearest pit latrine. They dismount. Everyone stops working, not officially. No one says, "Put down your tools," but the silence spreads like a cold breeze. You lower your timber and wipe your hands, watching as the trio walks straight toward the tower, where the master mason now stands, arms crossed, jaw tight. The conversation is low and tense. You can't hear everything, but enough words float over budget, behind schedule, mortar quality, stone alignment, unauthorized deviation. It's amazing how many ways a person can say you're doing it wrong while never actually picking up a tool. Eventually, they start the tour, which means poking things, tapping at walls, scribbling notes. You and a few others are told to accompany them, ostensibly to answer questions, really just to carry scrolls and serve as examples of current labor conditions. You feel like a badly dressed prop in a morality play at the outer gate. The ink-fed one shakes his head at the iron fittings and mutters, "Not standard." The chainmail knight raps his gauntlet against the gatepost and says, "This would never hold under battering." You glance at the post, then at the 3 ox carts full of reinforcement beams sitting right there, clearly waiting to be installed. No one cares that the tower stairwell, the twitchy one, pokes his head into the spiral and scowls. "Narrow," he says, that the mason grits his teeth. "It's supposed to be narrow," he explains for the 3rd time. For defense, to which he says nothing, just scribbles something in his notes. Probably too narrow. And that's the worst part. None of them trust the people actually building the thing. These men weren't here when the foundation collapsed. They didn't help rebuild the trench when the rain turned the courtyard into soup. They didn't see Davon fall. They didn't dig out the lime pit or drag their hands raw across rough stone until it held firm. But now they walk through it all like judges, weighing every block against some ideal that exists only in their minds, or worse, in a half-finished manual written by someone who's never laid a single stone. You hold your tongue. Everyone does, because even one bad report can shut down the entire site. There are stories, plenty of them, about builds halted for years because of a single parchment full of complaints. One castle was abandoned because the inspector claimed the moat was too shallow for dignity. Another lost royal funding because the gatehouse didn't match the newest fashion out of Paris fashion for fortresses. At dinner that night, no one eats with much appetite. The inspectors are gone, but the tension lingers like smoke after a fire. The master mason sits by himself, chewing slowly, staring into the flames with the look of a man weighing how much effort it would take to fake his own death. You hear that a section of the wall may have to be redundant because it's unsafe, but because it doesn't reflect current architectural sensibilities, whatever that means. The younger workers are confused, angry. "It's a castle," one of them says, "not a painting." You nod, then say, "Castles are political." And you hate how much that's true, because deep down you've realized something ugly. Castles aren't just built for war or protection or even legacy. They're built to impress, to reflect the power of a man who will probably never lay a hand on a hammer. And if that man changes his mind, if the trends change, if the inspector wants a round tower instead of a square one, you'd better start chiseling. A fringe theory circulates among the more cynical workers. These inspections are just power plays. The lords send them not to check progress, but to remind everyone who's really in charge. The build can be perfect, flawless even, but if the inspector feels like flexing, something will get torn down. There's an older mason, silent most days, who breaks his quiet tonight just long enough to say, built the same gate 3 times. Third one was identical to the first. Then he goes back to his bread. No one says anything after that later. As you roll into your straw bedding, you stare at the canvas above you and wonder how many of the stones you've touched will survive the next week, the next month, the next inspector. Maybe none. Maybe all of them. You'll keep building either way, 'cause that's the job. Lay the stone, watch it fall. Lay it again. You've built walls. You've climbed towers. You've nearly frozen in the rain, nearly passed out in the heat, and have enough calluses on your hands to qualify as armor. But nothing has prepared you for what it's like working inside the kitchens. Not eating in the kitchens, working, building them. Because while the rest of the castle gets the glory the towering keeps, the fortified gatehouses, the murder holes and grand halls, the kitchens are where the chaos lives. And it's a whole different kind of nightmare. The smell hits you. First not because it's bad though, give it a few weeks of heavy use and that'll change. But because of the combination. You're laying the stone hearths while the cook staff is already moving in. Someone insisted on finishing construction in phases, so now you're wedging stones into place, while geese flap around your knees, and a furious woman with flour on her eyebrows screams for firewood. It's like building a bakery in the middle of a battlefield. The kitchen itself isn't just a room. Huge fireplaces along one wall, each big enough to roast an entire boar. A raised hearth in the center with room for multiple pots, to baking ovens recessed into thick stone niches, and racks already being installed for spits and grates. Smoke hoods overhead, though they're mostly decorative for now, because the chimney hasn't been fully lined and still puffs out the occasional ghost of soot when the wind shifts. Your job today is to finish the drainage. Channels carved into the floor, because no one wants to work around ankle-deep grease. The design is smart. Angled grooves running toward a central trench that leads to a pit outside the wall. You shape the stone so the angles are just right. Every shallow slope guiding the liquid waste out and down. And all the while, the cooks are hovering, complaining about the dust, the tools, the noise. You try not to take it personally. Someone dumps a bucket of offal near the unfinished drain, and the smell that rises makes your nose retreat into your skull. You keep working. The thing about there's a moment in the afternoon when a sullen. You wonder how many more storms will hit before the castle is done in, whether the roof will hold. You built it. You'll find out. The Lord is coming again. You'd think this would be a good thing, right? The man whose coin keeps the stones rising. Seal gives this whole mad endeavor legitimacy. Whose personal tastes shape everything from the width of the gatehouse to the height of the great hall doors. Surely his visit would be met with excitement, or at least pride. It's met with absolute panic, because every time the Lord visits the site, something has to change. Word spreads before sunrise. A rider galloped through just before midnight, soaked and breathless, bearing a message stamped with the house crest and sealed with wax that barely held together. His lordship wishes to review progress firsthand, which roughly translates to, "You've got 1 day to make this place look like it wasn't cobbled together by sleep-deprived masons and held together by wet string." And so today isn't about building, it's about performing. Before dawn, you're already hauling rubble off the paths that haven't yet been paved. You rake sand over muddy patches to make them look intentional. You wrap linen around a cracked scaffold post to make it look reinforced rather than dangerously close to snapping. Someone's tasked with hanging makeshift banners over the unfinished battlements, as if swatches of wool will disguise the gaps in the STONEWORK. It's theater. Architectural theater. You're assigned to the Great Hall interior still, mostly, an echo chamber of damp stone and splinters, and told to dress it up, which is a polite way of saying, hide everything embarrassing. You and 3 others drag in benches that haven't been sat on yet and arrange them in a line that suggests a room of purpose. You stack clean planks over the unfinished hearth to give the illusion of a functioning fire pit. You even light a few candles near the altarish, though the wax runs fast and messy in the drafty space. The goal isn't to convince the Lord that it's finished. It's to make him feel like it's getting close. The arrival happens just after midday. Trumpets, of course, an entire horn section blaring through the drizzle like it's a festival and not a last-minute sight scramble. His retinue rides up in long cloaks. The Lord himself beneath a velvet hood, which he throws back with theatrical precision as he dismounts. You've seen him only once before, from a distance, but now he's close enough to smell the expensive oils in his beard. He doesn't walk like someone who's ever carried anything heavier than a wine goblet. The master mason steps forward, bows low, and begins the rehearsed speech. Progress, improvements, innovations, stone quality, labor for soul, the words nobles like to hear when they're about to write another check. The Lord nods occasionally, his eyes scanning the walls like a man judging a tapestry rather than a structure that's taken a decade to rise. You're ordered to stand by the door ready to help if something goes wrong. It's not a likely assignment, but symbolic. Look, my Lord Evan, our lowest workers are dedicated and presentable. You try to stand tall, though your tunic is torn at the sleeve, and you smell like lime dust and cooked onions as the tour begins. You trail behind, just close enough to overhear. The Lord likes the chapel, calls it a solemn little thing. He gestures vaguely at the walls and says he might commission a stained glass window, maybe, with his own face in it. The master mason smiles tightly and says it would be a great honor. The Lord doesn't like the kitchen too plain, he suggests, adding a second half. You know the budget doesn't allow for that. You also know that no isn't an option. Someone will lose sleep over that comment tonight in the Great Hall. He stops, looks up at the still exposed rafters, and frowns. Bit dark, he says. Could we open the roof a little more? No one answers for a beat. Then the carpenter Pelafast mumbles something about smoke control and weather protection. The Lord shrugs. Well, just a thought. You bite your tongue. But it's the gatehouse that nearly breaks the crew's collective spirit. He walks up to it, studies the height, runs his hand over a section of newly laid stone, and says, "Does it feel narrow to anyone else?" Silence. Then the phrase, "everyone dreads," might be worth rethinking the proportions. Rethinking the proportions. After 2 years, after 4 collapses, after 6 redesigns, after over 40,000 stones quarried, he wants to rethink the proportions. The master mason's face doesn't move. It can't. If it does, it will scream. But later, in the quiet of the camp, everyone talks about it. The problem with a Lord's visit isn't the disruption. it's the doubt he leaves behind. Every stone now seems slightly wrong, every angle suspect. The window you spent 2 weeks framing perfectly. Maybe the opening's too narrow. Maybe the light falls wrong. Maybe the tower should be taller. Maybe the roof curve isn't pleasing enough. Everyone has questions now. Everyone's afraid to answer them that night. Someone mutters the oldest joke on sight. If the Lord wants a castle, let him build it himself. No one laughs. There's a long-standing debate among scholars about how involved medieval lords actually were in construction. Some say they obsessed over every detail. Others argue they only showed up for milestones and feasts. But from your perspective, they show up when it's most inconvenient day. They leave before anything breaks. A quirky detail. Some lords were so particular about their castles that they ordered rooms to be rebuilt not because they failed structurally, but because they failed aesthetically. One famous case involved a dining hall being torn down and rebuilt 3 feet longer just so the lord could say his was larger than his rivals. You feel that same energy now. This castle isn't just a fortress. It's a monument to ego. Back in your tent, you wipe mud from your boots and replay the visit in your head. The Lord's comments loop, infecting every memory of the work you've done. You wonder if anything you laid will still be standing in a year. But then you remind yourself, he didn't lay those stones. You did, and no banner or trumpet can take that away. The first snowfall comes in the night, soft at first, like someone shaking flour over the world. When you wake, it's already coated the camp, muffling every sound, silencing boots, burying tools. A white hush has settled over the castle site, not the joyful kind that makes you want to build snowmen and throw snowballs, but the slow, creeping kind that whispers, you've run out of time. Everything slows in the snow movement, progress, blood. The ropes freeze stiff, the pulleys seize, mortar won't set, and stone turns to ice under your fingertips. The fires burn longer and brighter, now not for comfort, but for survival. You huddle close to them, palms out, face flushed and raw. Every tool feels heavier. Every step feels like walking through syrup that bites. Still, there's work to be done. The castle doesn't stop for winter, not if the Lord still breathes. Not if the steward still checks his ledgers every week. Not if the wall still leans complete, exposed to the wind like bones without skin. So you're sent to the supply yard, where the timbers are frozen together and the stone blocks were little white caps. Your task, help construct makeshift covers, wooden lean-tos, tread cloth awnings, anything to shield the most vulnerable parts of the build before the snow buries them. You spend the morning driving stakes into frozen ground. It takes twice the effort for half the result. Your fingers are numb. Your breath curls in front of your face like smoke, and every knot you tie feels like a race against frostbite. You keep moving. You have to. The cold is patient. The cold waits for you to stop. By midday, the snow thickens. It falls heavier now, faster, whiting out the towers until they fade like memories. You look up and can barely see the top of the scaffolding. Somewhere up there, another crew is still at work, stubbornly trying to seal the last of the upper walls. You hear muffled hammering through the storm, no shouting, just the rhythmic knock of men pretending winter hasn't already won. You take your lunch standing, chewing hard bread with your back against a stack of frozen bricks. Someone hands you a ladle of hot broth, thin, greasy, scalding. You drink it anyway. Steam rises from the cup and fogs your lashes. For a moment, it feels like you're wrapped in warmth, but only for a moment. In the afternoon, the foreman calls for volunteers to help move sacks of lime into the storage shed before the moisture ruins them. You volunteer, you wish you hadn't. The lime bags are soaked around the edges, heavy as corpses. One splits open mid-lift and releases a cloud of fine white dust that clings to your clothes, your face, your lungs. You cough hard enough to see stars. The others laugh, not cruelly, just out of survival. If you don't laugh, you break by the time the sun starts dipping below the ridgeline. The castle has transformed into something else entirely. It's no longer a work. It's a ghosta, half-born stone creature wrapped in frost, looming in silence. The walls seem taller in the snow. The chapel looks holier. The towers more mysterious. The gatehouse more unforgiving. It's beautiful in a way that makes you uneasy. You walk the perimeter with a few others, checking the makeshift coverings, hammering ice from the scaffolding joints, brushing snow off the pulley ropes so they don't freeze in place. You pass by the garderobe, shoot, and see a strange icicle forming at the bottom. You don't want to think about what's inside it. There's an odd tradition some of the workers have. When the first true snow sticks, they scratch their initials into the stone, not for pride, not for legacy, just to say. But when you wake, the snow is still falling, and the rope in your tent is frozen stiff.